few years ago, I founded and created the first daily newspaper for children in America. We are in thousands of schools, and we are trying to really get kids to love learning about the world and love learning about reality. And as I wrote in the title, not informational text, which is sort of a teacher's term, but ultimately it's just another word to describe reality. All of our articles are from K through 8. We write at different levels. And when I'm writing a story for a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and I'm dealing with major stories. But, this isn't just animals and silly stories. We wrote about everything you'd read in the newspaper, just about. This week, NATO began its largest military operation since the end of the Cold War. And I'm writing about that for 7-year-olds in Idaho. But believe it or not, they care. They care, and they want to know more, and they're curious. And I think that as adults, we don't give them enough credit. I've seen that. I've seen how bright and brilliant they are. But I want to talk a little bit about the ways that I try to approach my stories, the ways that I try to engage them and get them to learn about this reality that they're in. Wherever you choose to define that. Again, we are also living in a world where the President of the United States, and this is an apolitical talk, but this sentence always blows my mind, where the President says, "What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening." Right? That's what he said earlier this year, and I keep coming back to that a lot because what is reality, right? So what you're seeing isn't actually what's happening. So anyway, I look at it as my role as the editor of this newspaper to help these kids make sense of the world, help them establish meaning. And I'll give you an example of how I try to do that, and it actually relates to one of the other speakers here today. All of our articles are read out loud at all the different levels. We're also in English and now Spanish and French and Arabic as of this back to school year. We're adding Mandarin next year, it seems. All these stories are read all around the world, and kids are listening. There are a lot of kids who are learning English here in the country, but also in 148 countries as well. And they're listening to the stories read out loud. And I loved all your descriptions, Ms. Levinson, about the inflection and the intonation, right, as how kids are learning. We actually have had some guest speakers read our stories. Ben Hawk did some recordings for us, which was really cool, just to hear how kids are learning this information much more than just from the written word, obviously. They're listening. We have videos and imagery as you'd expect, but it's really interesting to see how kids interpret this information. And as an adult speaking to a room of other adults, we tend to believe that kids see the world in somewhat of a way that we do. And we're very wrong. At least I'm reminded of that every day. And I'll give you a quick example. The reason that I started this newspaper is my business partner had a 7-year-old daughter, and we were here in New York City, and this was the day that Muammar Gaddafi had been assassinated. And his bloodied corpse was on the front pages of the New York Post, right? You walk by a newsstand and you're seeing a dead body covered in blood, totally grotesque. You can't hide kids from that. This is New York City. You can't even get in a taxi without the news blaring at you. So the 7-year-old girl asked a really innocent question. She looked at that picture and she said, "Who is that man? Am I in danger?" And she internalized it, right? It was forget about the fact that it happened in a faraway country, like 5,000 miles away. That had no meaning to her, right? And so the idea that there was a dead person on the cover, that she got scared. And I think we all have that a little bit, when we see the images from the news, but kids don't have that context. You could say, "Oh, no, that was in Libya. Don't worry." That doesn't help. One of the things I learned in my research in GS, and I love the expression, "the map is not the territory," and I love it because I guess I'm a bit of a cartography geek. I love maps. Sorry. And I love, one of the things that I try to do is give kids context, right? So when I say that this, don't worry, that happened in Libya, you're safe. What does that mean? So one thing I try to do, well, the newspaper, it's called News-O-Matic, and every article has a map, and it includes where the story takes place and where the child is in relation to it. It actually uses the GPS of the device, which is kind of neat, using technology to kind of make the world a little closer. And I know we had a little talk earlier about AR. We actually have augmented reality where kids can see themselves in relation to the story on a real AR globe, which is neat. And it shows them where the story takes place. It gives them miles, kilometers, how long it would take to ride a bike there, or fly, or take a boat, or just all these different contexts. They can hear the languages spoken in that country and extra little factoids about the place. But I love the idea of putting it in context and putting the kid on the map. It's all the idea of making the world seem like a little bit of a smaller place. And I'm trying my darndest to get these kids to be global citizens, right? To get them to understand the bigger world. And I think that if they can see where they are and how they fit as a piece of the puzzle to all these stories, I think these kids will be growing up more empowered. That's ultimately my goal. But gosh, they have such blurred lines of reality. I mean, that's, again, as adults, we have a better sense of that. And we also have a sense that we want to protect these kids. And again, when I started this, people were going, no, I don't want my kids reading that stuff. When the Ebola crisis began a few years ago, I had kids writing into me, and even before me doing a story about it, because I tried to avoid it. I did not want to have to write about it. It was a terrifying topic. I think we were all a little bit freaked out. But I was having kids, and I remember one child wrote in from Oregon saying, my friend has got a nosebleed on the playground. Does he now have Ebola? Again, West Africa is far from Oregon, but they didn't grasp that. And so I do include these maps, but I think what I've learned, at least personally, and what I'm going to try to continue to promote, is the idea that the map is not the territory, right? That I love the idea that what you're seeing there, we're just giving an idea of what exists, but I'm hoping that these kids can come up with their own realities and come up with their own critical thinking on these topics. I don't know. I keep coming back to that idea of what you're seeing is not what's happening, and we have a lot of work ahead of us, guys. I don't know. I've been a little bit inspired by even just in the conversations I've had earlier today with some of you folks, and trying to push the needle towards, and the term that we're using a lot now is media literacy. There's actually a big event coming up beginning, ironically or coincidentally, on the week of the election. It's Media Literacy Week, so we're doing all sorts of pushes and features trying to get kids to be a bit more media literate. What does that mean? And again, it's about being critical about the words that they're seeing, and the visuals. That's all part of it. But again, just going back to the idea that these are children, right? 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, all over the country. They don't really have a sense of the world, and we have to appreciate that, and we have to sort of help them along, guide them along. If you guys have children or nieces or nephews, or you just work with children, I want you to take a step and realize, I'm writing these articles for third graders, right? Second, third, fourth grade. These kids are just making that transition from learning to read to reading to learn, right? They are making that step from they're still in the process of decoding letters, right? How do the individual letters form words, and how do the words form sentences, and how can you now tell a story through that whole combination of letters and words and sentences, and make meaning from all that? These kids are also exposed to different research shows up to 80% or more of the reading going on in these lower elementary grades is fiction, right? It's Harry Potter's and talking dogs, and those stories are wonderful. But these kids also need to learn about their world, right? And actually, there's a movement for that, and it ties back into informational text. The idea that even as they're making that transition to reading independently, let's get them, let's grab them, let's teach them about their world. Doesn't mean that fiction doesn't have a place, but they need to be learning about their world. These are kids who are going to have a great deal of challenges on planet Earth here in the 2000s. So I'm really doing my best to help them make meaning and being more media literate. And I don't know, I really appreciate the opportunity to learn a bit more about GS, and I'm grateful to all of you guys for continuing to, I love the term push the needle. Sometimes it feels a bit daunting to make a big difference in this world. There's a lot out there that's slightly terrifying. But if we can all push the needle, I know I'm going to do my part. From my conversation so far, I feel like you guys are all doing your part. This is a really terrific community, and I thank you for all you're doing, and I promise to keep it up on my end and help these kids make sense of their world. So thank you.